G'day, Dr. Carl, Shirtloads of Sciences, Part 2, with Dr. Marian-Andrei, Professor
Rizoiu,
and talking about disinformation and misinformation, and surprisingly how often the actual information is the same, but how it is framed and the shares are what is important. And now we're going to go into two other issues, I hope, in Part 2 here. The manosphere, where you've seen some sort of weird thinking about what makes a male or female, and then the radicalisation, how you can bring people back. So let's dive into the manosphere pipeline, how young males, I'm guessing, well, you're the expert. Tell us what it is and what we are trying to do about it. And you've done some research with two different cohort groups.
We have. So thank you for bringing me back. It's great being here. Remember when I was telling you about our misinformation ecosystem, and then we studied it in our previous work. Now there's been, in there, what we notice is that there is a typical structuring of the misinformation. And I'll go into the manosphere in a second. Yeah. I just want to set up the framework a bit. What we noticed over and over when we were looking at our target groups is that there seemed to be a classical structuring in which a group of producers, let's call them the influencers, were producing content that was catered, and it was also targeted at a wide group of consumers. And this content seemed to have specificities in both the topics and the themes, but also in terms of the delivery and the styling and the formatting. So various personas, personas is a fictive grouping of users that share some particular similarities. So each of these personas seem to have their own preferences in terms of how the content will be delivered. Is it short videos? Is it short text? Is it fake science?
So TikTok versus the longer form YouTube.
For example.
Yep.
Now, our previous research studied extensively the personas, the consumers. It studied also the formatting, and whether looking at the formatting or copying the formatting can allow us to reach the personas better. And we've actually performed studies using ads on Facebook. We tried to compare two different versions of the same message, where everything was the same except the styling, and trying to understand if we reached the individual better. I can spend a lot more time, but that's not what you asked me.
Because we've got to get to radicalisation.
We do.
Okay.
So, in this particular line of research, we started looking at producers of the information and producers of misinformation. And one of the case studies that we really wanted to dive into was manosphere, and or sometimes called toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity, yep.
So for your viewers that haven't heard about of those terms, congratulations. That means they've been living a good life, not knowing about it. I'm sorry to ruin their day. But toxic masculinity is a trend of information flowing online, which talks about return of the good old values and the divide between the gender roles. So it's a very stereotyped, very not just traditional, but really old school view of the roles of the genders, particularly about the roles of the women, what they should be allowed and not be allowed to do. Pretty backwards looking type of ideology. The problem and the weirdness about toxic masculinity is that it's influencers, which I'm pretty sure your audience has heard of, the infamous Andrew Tate and his likes.
Yeah, got it here. Yep.
Their audience that they cater for is 10 to 13-year-olds. So we're talking about very, very backwards-looking values of gender and roles in family, and even the way that couple formation and how relationships should occur in a family. These are being served to our very, very young cohort. Young to 13-year-old boys.
And their brains at the age of 10 are working really hard.
They're working really hard, they're absorbing it, and then it starts to show. We see there's increasing amount of professionals in the education space, principals, professors, already reporting incidents with the consumers of this information, particularly towards female teachers.
It has led to changed behaviour.
It has already changed behaviour.
From the young male students to their female older teachers.
and their colleagues.
And their female colleagues.
Yes. So
Wow.
we're talking about abuses, we're talking about insults, just a general degraded environment. And they will grow up in these values and they will be young adults.
Although we will be talking about bringing them back. So in one particular study, you talk about two different cohorts. One looking at differences between TikTok and YouTube, and the other one's looked at parent-guardian educated discussions. So your first finding was that there were different ways that the different platforms operated.
Well, and depending on obviously who I'm talking about this research, if I'm talking to a marketing professional, they'll tell me, well, of course, that's how it operates. But then the audience at large probably doesn't know this. But each platform has its own preferred approach towards the content. And even the recommender engine and the automated algorithms actually prefer types of content. So if you're catering to a TikTok audience, it would require, or Instagram in that for that in same type of approach. They prioritize obviously short videos, up to a minute or 90 seconds, filmed in casual styles. The typical influencer, getting out with a smartphone and say, "Hey, I just got out of the gym, and let me just give you one quick advice on how to deal with women."
So you talk about the lifestyle advice here on fitness, relationships, and well-being, delivered through short, informally filmed videos, whereas YouTube is more formal?
The YouTube would be the more formal setup, longer videos, higher quality, better equipment, better quality of sound, more of the talk show type of.
Okay. And then your second finding was about critical awareness gaps among parents and educators, coupled with a limited ability or capacity to intervene.
We've been asking the question of what is there? What type of information is aware and available for the parents? How do they react to it? And it turns out that they struggle. They struggle to know what support exists. They don't even know who should be responsible for dealing with it. But most importantly, what we noticed is that even though they were not necessarily endorsing the behavior of the likes of Andrew Tate, so they did consider them to be an undesirable element, they didn't fully repudiate the mentality either, with the typical expressions like boys be boys and sort of an acceptance of the older school values, which is something we didn't expect. So there's a coupling of lack of information and knowledge of what is actually happening with not a full pushback of the ideology either.
Well, social media really began only in 2009 with the iPhone 3, and it's been evolving very, very rapidly. Now, your third finding was about mixed campaign effectiveness across different platforms and target audiences. And this is also talking about diverting the manosphere pipeline here.
This is not specifically designed at the manosphere pipeline, so we can be applied for diverting the manosphere pipeline. But one of the things, as we were consuming more and more of this information, both on multiple platforms, and this is one of the beauty of working with multiple social media platforms, is we start to understand what is likely to work on each of these platforms and what is likely to not engage as much. Because remember, it's not just choices around content, short videos versus long videos, influencer style versus talk show, but also the type of audience behind each of these platforms. Right? And it is known, for example, that the audience on Facebook is older. So on Facebook, we would cater for an older audience, I say 30 plus. Young people are not really on Facebook. If you want to reach the young people, then you need to go where the young people are, which tend to be TikTok these days. This is the platforms of choice. So when making choices about, for example, where to communicate, we need to account for where the audiences are.
That then leads us into the next thing, which I do like, which is the model for intervention. And you're talking about radicalisation. And one thing you said here was the pathway into becoming radicalised is staged progression, and they don't just leap into extreme beliefs. There's measurable progression. And I know one case of somebody who on one occasion started off by being totally reasonable and then gradually went more and more down the pathway until on one occasion I had a conversation with him where he said that firstly, Princess Diana from the British royal family had been assassinated by the British royal family, and in the same conversation, he said that she was still alive. So he believed both, that she had been killed by the British royal family, but she was still alive. And I thought, they are conflicting beliefs to have, but he had both in one head. And then further down the line, with regard to COVID-19, he said that there was always been a conspiracy run by the big pharmaceutical companies to make us believe that there are germs. He said there's no such things as germs, there's no bacteria, there's no viruses, they don't exist. It's all a con by big pharma, but COVID was caused by a natural virus which was mutated by China, Venezuela and the USA to wipe out all of and then pick the social group you don't want. So there are no viruses, but COVID is based on a virus. So how do people get into being radicalised? And you mentioned a pathway model for intervention. Tell me how we can bring them back.
It made me think of the saying, flat Earth, Flat Earth Society members around the globe unite. It's the same.
Same thing, yes.
So the radicalization pipeline, it is one of our research results, and it stemmed not from one observation like the one you just described, but actually from a large number of such observations.
Over a period of time.
We were looking online, so we were looking mainly at testimonials. So we had them all. We had them all grouped together, but not just the one, but rather many examples. As we were analyzing the data, as we were analyzing the social groups that we were looking at of the fringe ideology consumers, what we noticed is that their level of radicalization or engagement with the ideology seemed to vary. We seem to find them in various stages, if you want, of their transition, where some would just be curiously dabbing their fingers into the ideology, whereas others would be pushing it and talking to the newcomers. So we seem to have a full spectrum. And what we notice more and more, and we came up with the idea that misinformation consumption is akin to a radicalization pathway. And then actually misinformation consumption can lead all the way at the end to violent extremist acts.
So, to violence? Against another human?
Against another human,
Whoa.
Yes. In fact, we have multiple examples here in Australia, including the incident in South Queensland a couple of years ago, where 2 police officers were killed by consumers of conspiracy theories who believed that they were finally there to get them. That is one of the examples. So how does this work? What we notice is that the misinformation consumption radicalization pathway is very much akin to ideological radicalization, like the political or the religious radicalization. So our pathway has 6 stages, going from the first stage, which is curiosity, all the way to the final stage where they are capable of violence.
So what's the first curiosity?
In the first stage, they have 2 things. They have a grudge, which is an unhappiness with the current state of facts, and an unknown, which then causes curiosity.
Right.
And then they will start exploring and they get in contact with the alternative content. Then they move to the second stage. Typically, in the second stage, they take the alternative content to the former sources of authority to get it checked out. So they're just curious. Let's say that the mother of young children that has just read online that vaccines cause autism takes it to the GP and asks, well, is that really true? And the worst thing that can happen at this point is that the GP or the source of authority actually reacts with a scornful reaction. You can't possibly believe that. Nobody is like
really?
that.
That's bad. That's the worst.
That is one of the worst. That is one of the worst. So this is one of the worst, among the worst reactions, is to have an
emotional, not a logical response.
Well, I guess we need to give the GPs a bit of credit there. They're there to solve problems, and they are time strapped, and they have pressures, and
they should be paid twice as much.
Well, we're going into I think so. That is a different topic. I agree with you, but that's
so what would the best response for a GP be under those circumstances?
It needs to be compassionate. It needs to be informative. So understanding the point where the individual in front of them is, and trying to give them the arguments, and then listening without judging. That's one of the, and that goes.
So run through that again. You got to listen to what they
want. Listen to their points without judgment.
Yep.
And try to both respond to their messages, their messaging, but constructively engage. So where did you read that? So why do you think it is like this? Have you considered the following aspect? But did you notice this? of course, this requires engagement. This requires time.
And they are not paid enough to. Okay, moving on.
So providing the information without a non-judgmental approach.
So the third stage, after they've been curious and then brought it back to an authority for checking, is
if they get the wrong messaging from the authority, then they will go back to their group, the alternative groups, where they receive that compassionate response. But of course, he said that, darling. They don't want you to know.
They don't want you to know.
The Kabbalah is there, and they've created the vaccines to put chips into us, or whatever the narrative of the day is. But the way it's received is received with the compassion that was lacking in the previous interaction.
So stage 3, they go back to
in stage 3, they move into the group and they start engaging more and more with the content of the group.
And they get compassion and understanding.
They get. Remember when we were talking in the previous episode about these groups starting to fulfill actual
social
needs?
Need.
That's right. What they are getting from the group, what they are not getting in their outside offline group or the other support groups. They start engaging more and more, but most importantly, they start keeping this engagement separate from their lives. So they almost start living like they have a disconnect between them.
And then how does that lead in stage 4?
Well, stages 1 to 3 is passive consumption. 4 to 6 is active. Passive, active. So in stage 4, they get more and more involved. They start posting, they start contributing, they start searching, they give opinions, they interact within the group.
They go to spread the good word as they see it.
They spread the good word, but mainly there's a lot of internal interaction of the group. A lot of that social fabric of the group is they contribute to it.
So what defines stage 4 as opposed to stage 5 then?
In stage 5, it appears what we call the erratic behavior. So it is when their engagement with the alternative reality gets to a point where it's detectable from the outside and it starts having real life impact. So they stop talking to their family, they stop doing their hobbies, they invest so much time that they start reducing of their previous life, their offline life, to be more and more immersed with these groups.
And what's the difference between 4 and 5? 4 is active with their...
So 4 is when they become active, but it's like their side hustle. Mm-hmm. And 5 is their main hustle.
And then 6?
In 6 is where they are capable of violent acts.
But that doesn't happen often.
No. Not everyone that enters the pipeline actually exits the pipeline. Right. Not everyone progresses. People stop at some points. Sometimes they'll go back. The speed of traversing the pipeline can vary. We know that the shooter that debarked in front of the Pizza Parlor in New York to free the children took 6 weeks to radicalize. So the entire pipeline can be traversed into 6 weeks or in years. Most importantly, what we've identified interventions and out-ramps.
Okay, so pathway model for intervention, that kind of ties to this other point you've raised, why current content moderation isn't working. So as we come towards the end, then take us into the intervention modalities.
There's multiple types of interventions that have been played with, all the way from pure moderation, where content is removed, deplatforming, where the accounts are being suspended by the platforms, but all the way to what is called soft moderation, where it's demoted from the recommendation engines or from the flows. And there could be other ways that we can explore more experimental in terms of the interventions. Like, for example, one of the things we've been playing with and toying with more from an academic point of view is we all know that people have limited cognitive capacities. So there's only as much as we can take in. So when we absorb, when something else captures our attention, something new comes, something else needs to sort of drop off the radar.
Something new comes here, something gets pushed out there.
In terms of attention, yes. Yeah. I don't think it stands with knowledge. No. Knowledge, there's probably a lot more potential, but with attention, definitely there is a case. So one way of dealing or moderating is to moderate harmful content would be to push up content that we know would both capture and reduce the attention to the previous content.
What else do you say? Like, you say here that sometimes moderation can accidentally strengthen the beliefs that they're trying to be silenced, that the forces of Big Pharma or Big Flat Earth or Big Globe Brother are trying to force them down. How do you get around that?
It is one of the big questions. It is known in the debunking community, it is known that when trying to put out misinformation is almost like trying to put out a fire with a bucket of gasoline. It is very likely that it backfires and you're actually making it worse, because what the reaction we are creating is, oh, they're trying to silence us. We must be onto something.
Yes. So you're saying here that you cannot combat deeply held misinformation with straightforward facts.
Because it's not an information problem. It's not, you can't just present the facts. We used to believe that. It was for a long time, it was our approach. If you consider misinformation to be an information problem, as in people consume misinformation because they don't have access to the fact-based information. If you have this attitude, then the logical pathway is, well, if people don't have the information, let's give them the information. So the believers of anti-vaccination ideology, all they need is to be presented the proof of all the countless, endless studies that show that vaccination does help.
But you're saying it doesn't work.
Absolutely not.
What will work?
Well, good question.
Is that ongoing research that you're trying?
We have work in that direction, yes.
Okay, so look, we should wind up here. Oh, I almost forgot. How did you, from Romania, end up here in Australia researching disinformation? How did it start?
This is going to sound so off that it will sound a bit like misinformation, but here you go, I'm going to try it. I've always wanted to be here.
Australia?
Yes.
Because of the animals, or our very high cuisine, or surfing, or motorbikes, or
none of the above. It's because when I was a school-age child, I had this big wooden desk at which I spent a lot of time doing homework. And as it was customary back in Eastern Europe at the time, the desk had a thick glass on top of it. And between the desk and the glass, my father slid a map of the world. So I essentially spent about 12 years of my life doing the homework, procrastinating looking at that map of the world. And Australia was right here near my right arm down in the southern. And I was looking at it. I knew all about its cities. It seemed so far away. It seemed so exotic. And I grew up in a post-communist country where some of my earliest memories is queuing up for our rations of bread and milk, just surviving every day in that post-communist reality seemed like a lot. And there was Australia, far away, exotic, and the land of plenty. So somehow in my impressionable child brain, Australia felt like the place where...
So you went through primary school in Romania?
I did primary school in Romania and a bachelor's of computer engineering.
Oh, and high school in Romania?
Yes. So I did the diploma in computer engineering.
And what languages did you speak while you were going to university? Romanian?
I studied English in school and French as a second language. I was not terribly good at it. And because I was not terribly good at it, then I went and I did a master's and my PhD in France.
So you were able to leave Romania?
Yes.
And do your master's and PhD in what subjects, in what fields?
I did data science and applied machine learning.
This was before OpenAI, AI.
We're talking here 2005, 2010.
Oh, okay. And then after that?
So after I finished my PhD in University of Lyon in France, I got an opportunity to do a short research visit here in Australia. I came in Australia to do a research visit in what was National ICT Australia, now is Data 61 CSIRO.
CSIRO.
Yes, so I came here for a month as a PhD student here in Sydney, and I loved it. It was just as good as the school child imagined.
Really?
And I promised myself that I want to be back. So I did what I could, and
so you went back to Europe again?
I had to go back to Europe, finalize my PhD, and then did a short postdoc afterwards. All the while keeping in contact with my contacts here and starting already joint work. And at some point they got probably bored with me, keep sending them progress reports of joint work that we were doing, and say, come on in. Well, let's see what you can do. So here I am.
Wow.
Once I started my academic career as an independent researcher, as a lecturer at UTS, that's when I told myself, I know how to understand information traveling through social systems. I want to apply it and make a difference in our society.
So making a difference in our society. Okay, so how can people follow you in your fine work and try to help you along your pathwork doing the work of the angels?
They've already started doing it by listening to your podcast here, because here we touched on a number of issues that are affecting, and that's already one step. If they want to know a bit more about the research, the easiest way is just Googling for my kind of not so common name with UTS. So that is Rizoiu at UTS.
And do you take on PhD students to help in this work?
I'm always looking for PhD students, capable PhD students who want to make a difference in combating misinformation.
Wow. Look, thank you very much for just giving us a brief glimpse of this world that I knew a tiny amount, but I didn't realise the subtleties of. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me.
Shirtloads of Science is washed, spun and aired by the University of Sydney.